Good morning, good morning, good morning. That's the wrong one. There we go. Hi, it's Sunday morning. This is The Art of Rock, where we come together to help you make your rock happen. Join us every Sunday here on ANGELSPIT'S Twitch, where you may go and get awesome stuff happening this time every week. And if you're not a fan of ANGELSPIT'S Twitch, go like it, because there's always interesting things happening, and there's some really cool things in the pipeline, which the Patreon members are going to learn about first, and which brings me to the point that many of these people are AngelSpit Patreons. You people keep me going sincerely. Thank you. And I'm going to keep you going, and we're going to keep each other going. Go join AngelSpit's Patreon. You get a sneak peek of everything that's coming up. A lot of what AngelSpit does will eventually be available for free, because that's the ethos. And it's really good because we've built this sort of community here where it's not just audio engineering according to Carl. It's all of these other voices chiming in, and we're developing this fantastic community of knowledge. But on the subject of Patreon members getting stuff for free, they're getting a copy of the new album for free, and that's kickstarting now. That's called Diesel Priest. That's the Kickstarter. I think there's only 10 days left, and I thank everybody who's backed that. Everything will also be available on the Bandcamp, and if you're in the UK or EU now, you can get everything from the Bandcamp, because fucking tariffs, but we're not going to go there right now. Sounds and Shadows is a great Facebook community. It's more like a cult, actually, that you should be part of. When are we going to be starting to wear cloaks? No, I think we should. But anyway, go like Sounds and Shadows, because there's a lot of really fantastic music-related talk that goes on there. And I was lucky enough to do an interview with them, and there's that interview. And on the subject of killer bands that you need to know about, there is a mind-bogglingly cool Spotify playlist that many of these bands are on, and you should go check it out. And reminder to these bands here, if you have a new track, let me know and I'll add it. Which is something I actually have to do, note to Carl. So go and listen to that and add it to your favorites so you keep playing it. Your favorite band is waiting for you. I'm on the subject of your favorite band waiting for you. MTV TV. And that's where we're going to be rating to after this. Did I do that right? Yes, I did. MTV TV is fantastic. That's the Twitch. Like that Twitch channel. If you're working, have it on in the background. Bands just send their stuff in, and MTV TV plays it because they are awesome. If you're in a band and you want your stuff played, that email address, email those people, and they will come to you and they'll say, yeah. Now, another really fantastic thing, it's so weird, is that MTV TV has just started a Patreon, and that's helping keep everything going, because computer charges and Wi-Fi costs and all of that other stuff, it adds up. So go check out their Patreon as well and keep them going. Welcome to Art of Rock. It's Sunday. Everyone, your mics are live. Julius, you had a really interesting question about fun automation. Go.
Yeah, hello. It's not exactly a question. It is let's collect some ideas on how to automate things creatively. I would like to start, maybe. Stuff I automate are usually master volume or channel volume, stereo separation for tension buildups, and filter cutoffs, as well as filter resonance. So yeah, if anyone has any more ideas, throw them to me.
Many. My first question is, with that filter, is it always a low pass, or do you play around with those filters?
It's low pass, high pass, band pass.
Great. High pass filters are really fantastic for creating mood and energy. And you don't have to do it like they pull the highs out and then they kick it in. It doesn't have to be that drastic. You can do stuff where you might set it at maybe 200. And when it goes into the choruses, or even better, you pull it out in the choruses, and when it's in the verse, that sound then spreads out. Filter, resonance, yeah. Anyone else? What are some other really cool things that we could be automating here? This is interesting. distortion amounts. Alex, I see your hand go.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest mixing guy, but I am a synthesizer guy, and I think what's interesting things are decay from your envelopes or release, especially if you have like arpeggios or sequences, can be really nice because it subtly changes the vibe. And also for lead sounds, you can automate the spread between the detune between the oscillators. If they're like less than a semitone detuned, you can detune them more to make them more fatter and less to make them more shallow, I guess. And yeah, I think maybe there's probably plenty more, but I think I usually look at the synthesizer and think, okay, what would be interesting to automate? So I look like go through each knob and think, what would be nice.
Yeah.
This is great. Yes.
Can I jump in? Another really fun thing to do is actually have the automation of one of the oscillators in the synth go up to a fifth. So you might be playing it, and during a long lead, it goes, it'll slide up, and then it'll continue playing in a fifth. I was listening to some Depeche Mode samples because I got my Emaxes back, and they have USB sticks on them, but I'm not going to hijack this. And I was listening to a lot of they came with all of the Depeche Mode live samples, and I was listening to them. And for example, Shake the Disease, the main da 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 da, that line it's doubled with another sound that is a sixth, a minor sixth, a sixth apart. And they will often have stuff where it's a fifth apart. So, but it'll be a quieter sound. So it'll be the main one on the root and a quieter one. And that's a really fun thing to automate as well, as when you go up to that sound, when it gets more intensive, that sound kind of brightens things up. Alex, go.
I just remembered one thing that's also really cool is to modulate the modulation intensity. So you have like an LFO controlling like, I don't know, a filter, and then you can control the intensity and maybe the speed. And that's also a really cool thing. Not all synthesizers have that, but of course the benefit with VSTs is that you can pretty much automate everything.
That's fantastic because, you can do the same thing where if it's not the speed, then it's the amount of LFO that's going into whatever it's modulating. And remember that if you apply, like if you've got one oscillator and then you've got that other oscillator that might be going to fifths, one other thing you might be applying to that oscillator is frequency modulation. And it might be like 1,000, so it's like a real, and you might like bring that up. Because the cool thing about when you really increase the frequency modulation on a sound, it starts sounding like shredding aluminium. It's like, and hey man, why just put it on the oscillator? You can also put it on the amplifier, because when you do that, it's a totally different sound. And remember, whatever frequency you're putting into, the sound's going to ring at that frequency. So you could assign that frequency to be, we were talking about the fifth. That's what the fifth could be. Or you could apply that to the filter. Because filter modulation is another big thing. All the prophets and stuff always have filter modulation on them, and it adds this beef. In fact, if you want to make the craziest bass sound ever, you add a shark tooth, a sawtooth, a tooth. Everybody calls them something different. Give me a break. You add one of those modulators to the frequency, to the filter, 1 octave below the actual sound. So the filter is opening and closing an octave below wherever the bass is, and it will give the impression of this insane sub. But it's not actually there. It's actually the filter giving you the impression that it's a sub. And you can modulate that too. And also attacks. If you've got pads and stuff, modulating the actual attacks, and even if you assign that to like the velocity, so if you hit it hard, it comes in faster, but if you hit it softly, it comes on and off softer as well, and that's a really nice thing. And also, always, I think if you've got like a graphic EQ, like a graphic EQ with a whole bunch of bands on it, like 32 bands or something, if you go through and you actually modulate them in real time, like actually get in there and move it with your pads, it's the most lovely sound. it kind of sounds like a vocoder, kind of sounds like a phaser, but it's this new, beautiful thing.
That's pretty unique.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cool.
These are all 70s tricks that I stole from Jean-Michel Jarre. You're gonna
That's fine.
Steal from the best.
Yeah.
All right, this is great. Come on, give me more ideas. Guitarists, what do you do for modulating stuff? Mark, I see your hand.
It only works if you're doing stereo sound, but I like when they play with pans.
Cool.
How much else to it?
I'm going to pick up on that after Alex. Go, Alex.
Yeah, of course, you can also automate mixing effects. Like, for example, if you use a compressor for like not mixing purposes, but like more sound design, you can also maybe change various parameters of the compressor. And you can also, of course, change the mix within the synthesizer, like add more sub-oscillator and so on.
Eric, can you hold your thought? I want to jump in. Thank you. Firstly, remind me, Front 242. Mark and Julius, you both brought up something about stereo spreading, and that's actually a really powerful dynamic tool that when you're coming into the choruses or whatever, you spread things out, and then you go back to mono. Really powerful. So if you ever want to make the Headhunter bassline sound, it's a DX7 sound called Hardwired, I think. Or was that a Frontline Assembly album? I don't remember. But anyway, and what they've got going on is if you are automating the amount of reverb and the reverb tail. So, and the wet-dry mix. So sometimes it's going to be gank, and sometimes it's going to be rank, because it's coming in behind the reverb. And if you automate all of that stuff, like if you sent yourself like this 2-bar pattern of reverb automation, you will get the most incredible bass line you've heard in your life. And it's got to be something like a slap guitar or a gank. It's got to be a really tough sound. So when it's going through that reverb, it's going to sound like a car driving through water. And remember to also change the length of that reverb as well. Eric, go.
Hello. I wanted to pick up on what Mark was saying with pan automation. I'm a huge fan of that, and I think it adds a lot to a song. And sometimes that's all you need for, especially vocals. If you can just animate or automate the pan going back and forth in the stereo, it gives it a little more depth to vocals and adds a little something interesting. And I don't think a lot of people use that technique, at least anymore. So it's something unique, and you hear it and you're just like, oh, that's pretty. I mean, you can do instruments too, obviously. I like to do it with vocals a lot.
Thanks, man. Julius.
I remembered one case where I automated a delay, and it was not merely for creative purpose. It was to get a noise gate without actually programming a noise gate. So I had this this delay with a really high level, which would actually go on forever and ever and ever. And then I had this automation to just bypass the delay and turn it off whenever I needed it.
That's cool. Thanks, man. Drake, and then can I jump in after you, Drake?
Of course. Yeah, this is sort of one of my challenges because I compose everything on hardware, and when I get it into the software, I don't want to take it too far because I don't want to deviate too much from what the live performance is going to be. So within the machines, you know, it's all about modulation. Automation is kind of like I'm limited to what I can do with parameter locks. So with parameter locks, I can make things happen at key times. But I've been playing around more with that within sort of set parameters. You know, volume automation is one thing. Mute automation is really helpful. You know, if you get to a point in the composition where you just want to cut off and have a clean break into something new, that can have quite a dramatic effect. In combination with the mute automation, I've just recently done some stuff with delay automation. So, you know, automating a delay activating on, say, the last vocal line, and then having that echo out a set number and then kicking in a mute. In this particular case, I limited it to like 3 echoes, and I didn't, beyond that point, it wasn't really gelling with the song, so it was like cut it off there. Yeah, and another thing that I'm going to be messing around with that I just kind of, I watched a video by Ken Marshall talking about gating, really getting into gates, and using like a hi-hat or some other instrument to trigger that gate, particularly on vocals. I think I'm going to be playing around with that. So
Awesome. 2 things. One, if you get a chance, there's a thing on Hulu at the moment called, or I think it's Hulu, 321 McCartney. It's fucking Rick Rubin and Paul McCartney sitting down talking about Beatles albums and Wings albums and actually going through the tracks, and it's mind blowing. And like they go into what George, oh my god, I forgot his name, the 5th Beatle. Someone help me.
Harrison.
Who?
Harrison.
No, he was the guitarist. The other one, the 5th Beatle, George Martin. What George Martin did, I know you and me just lost credibility right there. What they were all doing, and they were saying how they made this statement that how so many of the bands at the time would just go to EMI, record the album, out they go, but the Beatles would stay in there and fuck around. And let me just hashtag that by saying fucking around in Abbey Road cost a lot of money that probably those other bands didn't have. So as a result, they were mucking around with reverb halls and tape loops. And when you really look at what the Beatles were doing in the late 60s, that was Delia Derbyshire, I think her name was. She was one of the driving forces behind the BBC Radio Phonics Workshop. That stuff's like avant-garde, like it really is. And when you listen to it in the context and everything else, it's just yet another reminder to experiment, because there are no time constraints. Just experiment. And I'll also say that if you've got knobs, like if you've got a keyboard that has knobs, try and record as much of that stuff live as you can, because it's actually another part of performance. I'm going to bring it up. Somebody was talking, I think Alex was talking about the delay times, the release times on an arpeggiator. Play with that live, muck around with it. Rob, talk to me.
Hey there. Yeah, I think you guys are talking about different types of modulation and what you do with modulation. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of the modern synthesizers. Sorry, I got a bit noisy. Most of the modern synthesizers have multiple modulation types built into their waveform generators, and they'll usually couple to a controller. So whether it's a pitch bend or a modulation wheel or knobs or a ribbon controller or a breath controller, those are all means or inputs if you don't use automation, if you just want to do manual control of modulation. And some of the synths that I have 30 or 40 modulation types. So, and you can do them after filtering, before filtering, and then chain them all so it's filter, modulate, filter, if you like. That's all in the art of the possible. And when I experiment with some of these synths, I spend hours just mucking around with them, because there's so many different ways that you can do it. It's just like what Adam's talked about previously about Reason, where you can plug everything into ridiculous combinations. There's an unlimited amount of combinations that you can do with hardware synths as well. It's not just FM.
Cool. Thanks, man. I'm getting into putting everything, all of the modulation on the one wheel, like on the modulation wheel. This is just a personal thing, is that I'm finding when you are given so many opportunities and options to do stuff, and I'm doing it mainly with the Rev 2, is that there's the verse version of the sound, and then you wind the wheel up and it's the chorus version. And that chorus version might bring in the sub oscillator, it might bring in a bit more distortion, it might take the chorus and spread it out. It also has a feature on it where you can spread each sound, each oscillator as it fires, and a lot of synths do this, and it takes all that stuff and spreads it up. So then you just wind it down again, and you got a verse sound which is kind of thin, and then it goes up to this chorus sound that's just going. And the great thing about that is as you know, the first chorus might only go like halfway, second chorus might go 3/4, and then at the end it goes all the way up, comes down, then all the way up a bit again, and that's part of the performance thing as well. Once again, it's about mucking around with your gear, giving yourself time, and allowing yourself to make mistakes. And hey man, this is my Abbey Road, so let's fuck around. Does anybody else have anything amazing they want to throw in? Because this is a fun conversation.
I just wanted to add that the Yamaha EX5, which is kind of 90s, it's got 3 mod wheels, and it's got six knobs, which are all assignable. And I've got a newer MIDI controller. It's the SL49. I think it's Novation Mark III SL not 49, and it's really good because the whole keyboard is set up to be just a parameter controller, but it's just got 1 mod wheel. So having multiple mod wheels, like the EX5 has 3 mod wheels all next to each other, so you can basically muck around with it in real time with 1 hand, which is kind of nice. And it has the breath controller input as well, so you can blow and control all sorts of crap at the same time.
Aaron, really quickly, I just one question for you, Rob, and everybody. Has anybody used Breath Controller before?
Yes.
Tell us of your, because my next thing was we need to use more Breath Controller. Rob, tell me about your Breath Controller experience.
I got the original Yamaha one, which plugs into the Yamaha EX5, and comes in a little baggie like this, and it's really good actually. I've got this is the second last model. Oh, it's a bit hard to see, I apologize. This is the second last model where you stick it in your gob with the mouthpiece, and you inhale and exhale, and the piezo inside is detecting all those vibrations. That's all it is. So it's quite easy. You can sing into it, you can hum into it, you can do whatever.
Okay, Rob, so if there's a piezo in there, does that mean that the input on that is actually an analog input?
Yes.
Oh my God, my mind is just fried. So what you can therefore do is get a piezo and use it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, there are other versions of this. There's I think there's a wind instrument like a flute or something like that, which also plugs into the old Yamaha series. And I'm sure there's something else, but yeah, they all use the same technology.
Because I know if you've got a pedal input, not a foot switch, but a pedal, that's also a 0 to plus 10 volts input, which means you can run it off from your modular synthesizer.
Right.
Because all my synths have, and this is something I'm only fucking figuring out now, is that I can be using voltages from the modular to control Emax, K2000, etc.
You have to be careful that you don't fry things, though. Not every.
Go ahead.
I've heard that if you use some modulars, they have too much voltage and will fry some keyboards. Not the whole keyboard, but just the circuitry.
It shouldn't, because the Emax specifies 0 to 10. And the most of my voltage output on the modular, it doesn't like negatives though, because that could get bad. And if you do fry it, it's my mate who's a tech guy said that this is the chip you have to fix, and it's kind of easy. But I'm really bad at that shit. Yeah, most modular stuff is as long as it's 0 to 5, and don't go negative. So I'm told. I have a feeling Rob's about to say something amazing about this, because Rob does techno stuff.
Yeah, I'm just double checking. I think because when I've done piezo stuff, it's always been current level, and the amplifier is in the circuitry to convert the current to a digital signal. But the sensor is analog. I'm just looking it up.
Okay. While you're doing that, I'm going to throw to Grim.
Oh, hey. Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess it ties into modulation. I think if you're getting frustrated with the sound, I mean, I'd put your editing cap on, and I know a lot of people despise editing, but when I find that things are going wrong and like, you know, a grim instrumental or just plain editing for my show, it's because there's some nuisance of a noise. There's something that's there, and it could be a 16th of a second, but it's throwing you off your game. So I definitely encourage, if you don't already do that, really expand the waveform file and really blow it up and get to where it's that unteenth of a second that's throwing everything off, you know, especially with echoes and reverbs and distortions. You can hard clip that shit out to help get you back on track. And I was just thinking about, for the sake of creative, like dynamic range, if you haven't listened to it or you haven't really listened to it in a while, listen to Garbage and listen to their song, I think, Paranoid. Holy shit. Because I think you'll have a giant cache of ideas, because the way they start the song and then the way it rolls and just goes, there's a lot of sharp synth swells that cut at a peak. They rise to a peak and then they hard clip. And it's just so freaking cool. Like, you got to check it out. And you may, you know, find that by extension, you want to adopt some of that into songs, or there are songs that I love that seemingly end, and then you hear the vocals start to wash in, you know, and they rise to a fever pitch, and then boom, they fucking hit you again. So, yeah, it's just my 2 cents, is really look at the waveform files in sharp detail so you can edit for that better sound, and listen to Garbage.
That's good advice. Alex, I think I saw your hand up, but then it disappeared.
I forgot what to say, so.
Just do what I do and make shit up.
So I just looked into the Yamaha, and it's at current level from the piezo. You set the gain on the piezo circuit to what level you want, and then you've got a cutoff. So in terms of signal to noise ratio, you're trying to emit background noise, and you're just listening to the blow. That signal is then converted to a CC code to control anything that's MIDI. That's how that one works.
Good stuff. Thank you, sir. Alex.
Yeah, there's a controller which controls multiple axes at once. It's called Touché, I believe. And if you're into live recording such things, it's a bit expensive, but it might be interesting for some people. And also, if you have hardware synths, you could use the expression pedal as a macro control, like you assign it to multiple destinations. Then you have one dial to control multiple parameters, maybe on your soft synth or your hard synth.
One dial to control them all. Well, which is actually kind of a really good idea, because then, and actually, you know, when I'm doing a live thing, did I just interrupt you? Oh, okay. When I'm doing a live thing, I'll have the master dial, and it's for the modular, so it's supplying 5 volts, 0 to 5 volts on the dial, and that dial it goes into a multiple, and then it's all going to feed something. It might feed the frequency on an arpeggiator, or this or that, or all of these different things. So if everything's just chomping along, all the different pieces, as I turn that dial up, it's going to go through and affect everything. So I will start the jam on dial 0, and as it goes through, I slowly bring it up. And then if you bring it back down again, it sucks everything back down. Fun. And you can probably do all that stuff in VSTs too.
You see that?
3 wheels.
Yeah, and a ribbon.
Damn.
Oh, it's a little bit blurry.
Dude, the 90s, man. They got it right with synthesizers.
Not with webcams.
No.
I got my filter turned on. Never mind.
We get it. Good stuff. Okay, does anybody else have anything mind-blowingly incredible they want to throw in on this very fun topic? Or do we want to flip over to another topic that I think Alex brought up before? Everybody talks at once as usual. Alex, you had a question.
Yes, I recently got a relatively good shaped, tape deck in relatively good shape for free, because somebody gave it away. and I wanted to try to distort it on purpose in order to make interesting samples. And the last time I used one was quite a while ago, and I wasn't as technically averse as I'm now. So if any of you have ideas on interesting things how to manipulate it, for example, I accidentally clipped the Dolby, and it gave an interesting sound, but I wanted to try to directly clip the or directly saturate the tape. If you have any ideas, maybe you could. I would be happy to listen.
I have ideas. Firstly, if you have an EQ or a graphic EQ or something, put it in before the tape deck, because when you drive stuff in, certain frequencies are going to distort first, usually bass, but depending on the sound that might be different. So if you have the opportunity to the option to be pulling a little bass out or adding a bit of highs or da-da-da-da-da, just so the distortion is more controlled, for want of a better term. And also it's tape distortion, so use it. Get yourself a good tape, like one of those Maxwell metal tapes, and drench that motherfucker.
They are so hard to find. I've been looking for metal tapes for like over a year and I can't find any.
Okay. So much for the great tape comeback. But I have a feeling it will be, but that's a side point. But get whatever you got, drench it. I found the higher quality is the better, and this also works with VHS as well. VHS are really good audio recording devices, and you can drench them too. But, you know, regular tape decks have got better monitoring inputs. And when I say drench it, I'm talking like 20 or 30 dB. Like, get in there and rough it up. As far as the Dolby and the bias and all that sort of thing goes, I don't really know. So I throw the floor open to anybody else who has a crazy idea. Even better if you have no crazy idea and you just have crazy. Go.
What unit have you got, Alex?
It's an Onkyo R1 from the early 90s. Oh no, it's a TA20A20. I think it's a German only model, but it's basically, I think it's not the most expensive thing, but it's really decent.
And it's got, is it a double tape deck, like a typical?
No, it's
stereo?
unfortunately just single tape, but it has Dolby B and C.
Yeah.
And some other features I can't use because I don't have the rest of the hi-fi system.
Guys, keep going. I've got to deal with something. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, so Dolby noise reduction is just filtering hiss and high frequencies out. So that's all it's really doing. Back in the early days, they didn't have a bass boost. They do in more modern days. So that would increase the gain proportionally of your lower end. You know, and now Dolby Atmos is on steroids, right? It's 14 channels of 2 or 3 bass boosts. So the early Dolby noise reduction was really just to remove the hiss on the tape. And
yeah, I was wondering
yeah,
if I should use it or not for the samplings, because it's like on the one hand less noise, but on the other hand it's exactly what I want.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make a subdued sound, then it's a good idea. And you know, you can send 2 different signals into it. You don't have to have the same sound in stereo. You can have one instrument on left and another instrument on right, and you can still output that to an EQ, or you can run it through a stereo EQ and then modify those 2 instruments with the EQ, the parameters that you want, and listen to it through the tape deck. So you'll have a tape out usually, or monitor out on the tape deck. You can run that back or use headphone socket and muck around with the settings and see which instruments kind of change with your modification of the EQ as well as the Dolby. Yeah, you'll be able to record stuff that way. The other thing you can do is put really crappy tapes in, not metal. If you use really crappy tapes, that even if they've been stretched, they will crackle, and if you've got stretch, it'll change the time base of the sound that you record, and that will actually create really interesting effects as well. The other thing you can do is take a regular cassette tape, record onto it, and then gently pass a magnet over the reels, and then play that back, and you'll get a kind of a spotty amplitude reduction across parts of the tape. And that can actually create a really interesting effect as well. Don't do it too much because it'll erase it. But yeah.
May I inquire? I'm sorry if you guys talked about this before. Does it have varispeed on it?
No, unfortunately not. It's just a consumer. Consumer.
I bought a 2-deck specifically with varispeed, so I could change that up.
Okay, awesome.
I wish it had. Yeah, I wish it had. It's really stable, and I sometimes wish it was more wobbly because that would be more interesting.
That's what I was wondering, because I know some tape decks, if you just barely hold the play button, sometimes you get like a warped playback, you know, and you might be able to mic that up and get something really cool that you've already recorded, and then
mine's got pitch control as a knob on the front. It's a two deck JVC, and you can essentially, like I said before, use both heads for different instruments. So you've got a two channel recorder, and use an EQ pre-cassette and modify those different instruments as you go in, and play with the Dolby and the pitch control and see what you think sounds cool, and then run that straight into your computer. So you're recording it all in real time. You're just using it as an effect, essentially.
My thoughts as well is, if you've got a drum loop, the great thing about distortion is that distortion will play the frequencies of different sounds off each other, and when they add, a kick and a snare and a hat at the same time, the distortion of that sound is totally different to if you added each of them distorted together. You know what I mean? The sum of the parts sort of situation. So, when you use it, what happens if you put your bass, the actual kick drum and the bass through that thing, and you actually can you record off tape? Because did we cover that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, they have monitor out on the back.
There you go. So you might be able to drop it in there while you're pulling it back into your door, and you squeeze your kick drum and your bass together or something. You
can also do a feedback loop. So take the monitor out, run it through a tiny mixing desk, merge it with the incoming sound, and then you just use your little mixer, go left to right or volume control, and create stupid amounts of feedback as well.
Now you put a delay in that chain and or a reverb.
Yeah, and then it goes nuts.
Yeah. Bastard. That's good find, man. That's really cool. If you can, fuck around with tape looping. Like actually splicing tape. I don't know if you're familiar with Delia Derbyshire. Gee, I hope I'm saying her name right. Who I mentioned, yeah. Why not? Fuck around with that shit. See what happens.
I think she made the Doctor Who theme, but
Yeah. Well, she didn't write it, but she fucked it up.
Yeah.
Ground stuff. Like, so inspiring. Yeah. She thought a modular synthesizer was cheating. Like, wow. That's how hardcore this woman was. That's all I got. If anybody else has something to throw in here, this is fun. Once again, we're talking about experimenting and allowing ourselves to experiment.
Another thing you can do with modulation is you can, you've got a bandpass filter, and that's only going to let through a certain frequency. If you use frequency modulation to set up which band you're going to pass, and then use an LFO to drive the value of the frequency modulator. So what's going to happen is it's going to go up and down the spectrum according to the sine wave of the LFO. And if you do that on FM, you can stretch the sound. So if you think about it, you can go from a high frequency, which is a higher rate, down to a low frequency, which is a slower rate. So it's basically like making a filter, an analog filter, but you can create your own combinations by using an LFO to modulate your modulator. And that will create what they usually use in wavetable synthesis, where they've got two different active modulations working in real time. And there are some really good VST plugins that do that for you. But yeah, that's the cool thing about wavetable synthesis is you can change multiple parameters over time. It's not just the one signal that you hear repeating. It's not just one frequency.
Awesome. Grim.
Hey, so I had an idea for a topic, but I don't want to derail anything. I want to make sure I wrote it down earlier. Alex also had a question about if I'm not butchering it, an Octatrack. Did we cover that at all?
Not yet. No, we haven't talked about Octatracks yet.
Okay. Yeah, I just figured, I don't know. I think it might be right in line with what everybody's talking about. So.
Okay. Well, does anybody else want to throw in on the tape deck situation? I did have one more thought. Then I'd love to talk about Octatracks, and I'd love to hear what Grim has to say. Should I just start shooting my mouth off? Why, yes, Carl, that's what you do best. So I don't know how much analog gear you have. Like, if you can take the output from that tape, that mashed tape, run that through a VCA, an amplifier, and then cut it on the 16ths, you know, or put a low an LFO over it, so it's opening and closing the amplifier of that tape deck 1,000 times a second. So it actually becomes this splattery thing. Or you put a crazy drum break through it, and distort it to Texas. And in your case, that's a long way. If I was going to distort something to Texas, it's not that far. But if you are, it's a lot of distortion. And you put like a 16th stutter on it. So it's, you know, I don't know, thoughts. So many fun things. Treat it like an oscillator.
Yeah, I just thought maybe I can try to, how's it called? Modify it. It has a name, but like add modulation capabilities for the internal dials, because I got it for free, and if I mess it up, it might be not as. It's still sad that something breaks over, but it might be interesting to have a dial for like or a CB in for the tape speed and so on.
Wow. You wanted to talk about the Octatrack.
Yes, because I know that Drake is also an Octatrack user, and I've been using mine for maybe 6 years or so, but I've always wondered how other people use it. And the most important thing is, Drake, do you put multiple tracks in one project, or is one project just one track? And if you use the Octatrack live, how do you use it live, and how do you use in general in your setup?
Okay, so I've got the Octatrack, and I've got the Analog Rhythm Mark II and the Analog 4 Mark II. So the Octatrack is kind of like the central component. I use it as a sequencer. So, you know, I basically, I designate 4 of the tracks to the Analog Rhythm and 4 of the tracks to the Analog 4. So typically, you know, 9 times out of 10, I'm kind of using the same configuration in terms of like the 4 tracks for the analog rhythms, like the kick, the snare, maybe a tom and a hi-hat kind of thing. And then, you know, what I use on the analog 4 just varies. In terms of samples, what I'm doing a lot of is I'll run my Access Virus into Logic, and I'll record different synth lines, and I'll process it. You know, bounce the WAV file down, and then import it into the Octatrack, and then trigger it and further modulate it from there. Do the same thing with live guitar. This new album's got a lot more guitar on it, so I'm recording the guitar into Logic, processing it, rendering it down, and importing it into the Octatrack. So at its core, that's kind of what I'm doing. All the sequencing happens in the Octatrack. You limit it to 8 different arrangements. So that's actually why my last 2 albums have been sort of 8-track releases, because I'm kind of like, okay, I've got 8 arrangements here. It all kind of fits. In a live scenario, you know, loading up a new project, I have to kind of figure out some kind of transitional piece, maybe on the analog 4 to keep the sound going while, you know, the Octatrack is loading up the next project. So I want to minimize the amount of load time and that kind of thing to make things smooth. So yeah.
Awesome.
Did that answer it, or is there anything else?
Yeah, I think you struggle with the same problem I have, and I think you have a similar solution with just being in one project. And I started out having 1 project per song, but I got into the problem that I wanted to, if I ever make it to live, that I would have load every time I want to play a new song, and it's like half a minute. And so I tried how to make that faster without having too much difficulties, because you can't name songs, I think, and you can't name parts. You can name parts, but not banks, and so it's...
Yeah, you can name your arrangements. You probably know that already. A new thing that I'm kind of trying out is within an arrangement, have 2 songs, like they're kind of the same song, but at some midpoint, they kind of do this drastic deviation where it could almost be a completely second track. And you know, when it comes to producing it, they may actually click to different tracks on the CD, but within the Octatrack, it's 1 arrangement. So I'm kind of using that to stretch it a little bit with this new batch of tracks I'm working on. But yeah, 1 project. 8 songs basically at its core.
And if you take the samples from Ableton, do you automate them in the Octatrack, or do you just play them straight without any alteration?
For the most part, well, no. I mean, I'm automating stuff through the oscillators for the sampler. And another thing I'll often do is, as you know, you can have different parts. So you could switch to a different part and load a completely new set of 8 samples in per part. So I'm using that quite a bit within 1 arrangement. And typically, you know, the 16 patterns within one of the alphabetic letters, that will be, I'll try to stay within that per arrangement. So, you know, all of the A's would be in the first arrangement. If I have to extend outside of that, you know, because I just have to creatively, I will, but I try to stay within that parameter just to keep things organized. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it helps me to build from what I have now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me offline too, if you want to talk about it further.
Rob. Thank you. That was, I love listening to people talk about samplers. I could listen to people crap on about samplers all day. Rob.
Somebody's got something flying around.
That's me.
Yeah, I just make a suggestion that anyone who does something tricky, like they've got a little trick that they do with their gear, maybe it's worth doing a little video of it and sticking it on the ANGELSPIT Discord, so everyone can kind of share their tricks, because sometimes it's a bit hard to explain. If you video and if you don't have a Twitch channel or anything like that, just grab your phone, be crappy and amateur about it, show the hookups, and then let's hear the sound effects that you can generate. Post that on Discord.
And obviously, I will gladly, you know, pimp that stuff everywhere, because there's a lot of people who want to know tricks. I want to circle back to this. Because I've got a face full of Emax stuff I want to hear about. Aaron, you wanted to bring something up. I want to hear your thoughts.
This might be a hard left, but I was going to ask about if anybody knows of any poor person's VFX or digital art resources. I don't know if the quick answer is just hire an artist or if somebody has a way of, either making, like, I guess, recommendations for digital art, or whether it's Wacom or Wacom Tavas, whatever it's called, or like digital design type stuff, especially when it comes to vectors and being able to have images that can be as small as a fingernail or as big as a billboard, because that's always been like a huge Achilles for like my project. So I just didn't know if y'all had anything that you use or if you just kind of farm it out to other people.
Thank you. Rose, I see your hand.
Unmute. Hey, what's up? It's my birthday, so
Happy birthday!
I'm in my unicorn onesie right now. So sorry to break the usual.
So that's your birthday suit.
This is my birthday suit, y'all. It's my birthday suit. But yeah, in another lifetime, in this lifetime actually, I was a graphic designer for many years. So yeah, I have a lot of really cool art resources to share with y'all. Like I said, I'm super about diversity, and I think one of the biggest obstacles for any musician getting into it is that it costs so much money to make art and music, it really does. So here's some really good resources for you guys. Grab a pen, get ready. All right, first off, for any, if you want something quick and very user-friendly and you have no art background at all, I highly recommend Canva.com. That's CANVA.com, right? It's a free web setup design program. It's already loaded with templates for all of the most popular social media stuff. So if you need to make the FB cover photo or the profile photo, you know what I mean? All of those dimensions are already set up for you in there. It's super easy. And like I said, it's free. They do have a pro version that has access to other things and other features that might be helpful to you. So that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion is Affinity. Affinity makes several different programs that are basically the best of any image editing program to even come close to Photoshop, Illustrator, all of that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of friends that are professional artists that have switched from Photoshop to Affinity, which is exactly what I did because I was tired of paying that subscription fee. I don't mind paying a flat fee out front. I can't stand to pay a recurring fee for something. I like to just have it, and that's it. And that's what you get with Affinity. It's very cheap. They often have sales online. So I got mine at half price. I got mine for $25. So I bought all of their stuff. So they have not only a Photoshop clone, but they also have, I think it's called Affinity Designer, which is a vector-based program that rivals Illustrator. It's not as good, but it's the closest that you're gonna find. I have tried everything under the sun. I've tried GIMP. I'm super into open source stuff. That's another resource. But honestly, I think Affinity is far superior. And for $25-50, you're not going to find a better image editing program. If you got any other questions, for video stuff, I highly recommend, I think I mentioned this before, DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is an amazing video editing program that also rivals all the major video editing programs that you're used to. And it's awesome. It takes a little bit of time to learn, but there are tons and tons and tons of tutorials that are accessed through the program itself and also just on YouTube and stuff like that, or Udemy or whatever. Highly recommend it. If you got any questions about any of these programs, go for it.
Thank you. Do they import, read accurately Adobe Photoshop InDesign files?
They do. Affinity does do that, actually.
How close are they? Because, Photoshop's big on the effects. If I put a color layer on there, does Affinity accurately read them?
Actually, I gotta say, so far there have not been any files that I had any trouble, any PSD files that I've had any trouble opening up.
Even if they have the colorizing, the levels, that sort of thing, like color adjustment stuff in there.
There are color adjustment options in Affinity, yes.
Right.
They do it as a separate adjustment layer, so it's non-destructive. They don't do it on like the base layer, but it does all of those things. I haven't run into anything yet. I mean, I'll let you know if I do, but so far I haven't had any problem. I open it up and it just works. But I could see that being a problem. And what I would do if that was the case is I would render whatever layers don't seem to be working beforehand and then import it into Affinity. But in general, I haven't had any problems at all.
And if somebody could put the URL in the chat, and I'm going to make all that stuff public because this is really good intel. I'm going to shut up
super,
now.
super helpful. And if anybody else has any questions, have at it.
No, it's badass to say the least. I appreciate it because you don't think about it until you're like, I got to get flyers done. I got to get a cover done. You know, I gotta do a business, or I want to do stickers. But then they ping you and they say, hey man, your image ain't up to snuff. And you're like, what do you mean it's not up to snuff? It looks pretty badass to me. But then you don't realize how much digital noise and how much bullshit's there. And it looks cool for a 3x5, but it looks terrible when you start going from there.
Yeah, definitely. I highly recommend, if they don't have a sale going on right now, to join the mailing list on the Affinity website, because they have sales all the time and they're usually for as high as like 50% off of their price, which is how I ended up buying like the whole set. Like I just bought all of their programs because I was very familiar with Photoshop. I was very familiar with Illustrator. I even bought they have like a Affinity, I think it's called Publisher, which is like, you know, like what's used for like laying out books and, you know, pamphlets and yeah, it's like an InDesign clone basically. And yeah, super, super highly recommend it. Like I've been going strong with it for over a year now. And there's certain things where you'll be like, oh, you know, like if you're used to Photoshop and you just have to get familiarized with their names for the tools and their roundabout certain, you know, they have to have certain differences legally in order to exist, you know, because I remember originally when a lot of other programs were trying to compete with Photoshop, they were like coming down hard on them with lawsuits and stuff because people made their programs a little too similar to Photoshop and they were like, hey, that's proprietary, you know? So there's going to be certain things that are laid out a different way, but especially if you're not familiar with Photoshop, it'll be even better because you won't have to unlearn the little quirks that you're used to in Photoshop.
Thank you. Drake.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rose, for sharing that. I'm a designer as well, and I've been forking out Adobe fees every month for Photoshop and Illustrator. I'm curious, you were an Adobe user, you were saying previous?
Absolutely.
What was the learning curve like moving from one to the other?
It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. Like I said, there's certain layout things that are like, oh, but you know, like they call the magic wand, they call it the flood tool instead. You know what I mean? Like certain things have different names or whatever. But if you're familiar with Photoshop, you're going to feel pretty comfortable with a lot of the way that it works. And honestly, I think like a tutorial or two just to like kind of show you around the workspace, and you'll be able to figure out everything. That's what I did. I just figured it out. I just played around with it enough and used it enough on images. And if I got stuck where I was like, damn, I'm used to doing this, you know what I mean? And how do I do this? And I wasn't sure because it wasn't in the same place that I expected it to be. Then I would just look it up on YouTube and then I'd immediately have my answer. And I'd be like, oh, okay, it's not that it doesn't have that, it's that I have to go about it this way, you know? So there's certain things where you're gonna be like, oh, you know, like they do certain things like slightly different where you're gonna be like, wait a second, why can't I do this? And it's not that you can't do it, it's just that you don't know how to do it in the program yet, but you will. It's not hard. It's very like, you know, it makes sense especially if you're an Adobe user, because it was clearly made for people that are comfortable with that program.
Cool, thank you. One more question really quick.
Go for it.
How does it do in terms of web optimization output? For your,
it has all the same kind of adjustment features and stuff like that, where you can set it for, you know, whatever DPI you need to set it to. You know, it can handle raw files also, you know what I mean? Like, it can do a lot. Like, it's very full featured, and the price is bonkers. So seriously, get on the mailing list. You can try, it has a free trial. So try the free trial out, and you're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get this. You know what I mean? And it's like, there's going to be just a couple of points where you're like, wait a second, where's this thing? But it's just that it's in a different menu. That's all. But you'll find it.
Brad, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Rob, fire away.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of web design a long time ago, like in the 80s and the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Quark Express and Illustrator back then were the big things. And I kind of migrated away from those because of the price myself.
Exactly.
And I ended up finding myself just using really simple tools like paint.net because they're free.
Yeah.
They're pretty limited, but they do pretty well for free, and it's easy to use. It's very easy for anyone to get on there and do stuff. But it doesn't export SVG, which is your scalable vector graphic, which is great for, you know, auto sizing web content. I am a big fan of DaVinci Resolve Studio. I love their workflow for both audio and video. What I've been experimenting with lately, which is kind of left field, is doing 3D art in Unreal Game Engine, which is free. And there's tons of videos online to learn how to use Unreal Game Engine. And you can download tons of free content that you're allowed to use for whatever. And if you don't want to work just in 2D, if you want something that's 3D, it's quite amazing. It's photorealistic. You have full control of all the complex lighting. You can also drop in your camera dollies and booms and everything and make a video clip inside of Unreal. It's pretty impressive. I've done a couple of Udemy courses, and I did a couple of courses through work for free, and it kicks ass. Like, I'm kind of thinking everything that I do in the future is all going to be done in Unreal, and it supports MIDI and everything as well, which is just crazy. In actual fact, people like deadmau5 are using the Unreal Game Engine studio lighting template to create their entire stage lighting rig in Unreal, just using blueprints. No coding required. It's all drag and drop click, and it's just amazing. It's kind of revolutionizing the concept of an app or a tool, because it's just stuff, and it does more and more stuff. And every month you've got free downloadable stuff from developers, and you know, the limitation is your hard drive space and your processor, your video graphics card. So you're going to be doing a lot more crunching and a lot more processing than you would in Premiere or Illustrator. That's the downside, and obviously there's a learning curve for it, but it is amazing.
That's awesome.
Drake, thank you, Rob.
Sorry, that's a hand that should have been lowered earlier.
That's okay.
I got nothing.
Hi. I definitely don't have the experience Drake or Rose doing this. But a lot of that stuff for me is a big learning curve. I don't come from that background at all. I use Photoscape X. There's a free version and a paid version, which is like $20. And for me, it's super easy to use. It's like I picked it up and learned it in like 20 minutes. So it's got a lot of options if you just want to throw something in to go super simple. Like I said, there's a free version you can download and try it out. If you like it, cool. If you don't, you don't. Microsoft makes it, which is pretty cool. And then to touch on what Rob was just saying too with Unreal Engine, I've actually recently downloaded that too. And being a gamer nerd since I was like 5 years old, super fun, super awesome. it's made for gamers. It's a gaming engine that's been around for decades, but people are using it now for music videos. Disney uses it for Mandalorian. They're doing awesome stuff with digital screens, like Rob was saying, behind instead of actually having green screens. Super cool. There's also something that they do called MetaHuman, where it's all and Unreal Engine's free. MetaHuman's also free, and you can download it and you can make yourself in the MetaHuman. It's like video games like Cyberpunk 2077 that just came out. Something similar. Sports games forever have been doing it. But you can create yourself in this MetaHuman, and then you can render it, export it, and then import it into Unreal Engine, so you actually have a version of yourself in the video. And it also has facial capture, so like when you're moving, you can like capture it with your phone, and the mouth and stuff will go with whatever your lyrics are for what you're doing. But it is a big learning curve. I shouldn't say that. Well, the learning curve, I mean, if you're into video games, you've been gaming, the learning curve's smaller. It's very user-friendly that way. If you haven't done any of that, it's a little bit bigger, but it looks intimidating because there's a lot of stuff to do, but super fun to use. And yeah, that's it. It's pretty awesome.
Jesus, dude, thank you. Today is mind-blowing day. Alex, it's your turn to blow my mind.
I don't know how it's called, but there is like the possibility to take pictures with your phone of an object from several angles, and there's software that automatically creates a 3D object from that. So if you want to make music videos, this could be a quick way to get assets and maybe interesting things to throw around. I have to look up how it's called, but I know that it exists.
It's stereo photogrammetry, and you use the same technique for building full VR immersion as well. So you can actually do that in Unreal Engine and build a fully interactive music video where you can look around with your smartphone taped to your head, however you want to do it. $20 headset, or use PlayStation or Android, or it doesn't matter. It's multi-platform. But yeah, you're right. It's stereo photogrammetry is really cool for making stuff like that really rapidly. Free on the latest iPhone 12, I think it is.
Awesome. Does anybody else have anything they want to throw in at this stage? Because all this stuff is just making me so excited about technology.
I like playing with all the new phone apps. You get logo branded phone apps where it's for free, and you can play with simple stuff like line art or smudge motion, pixel motion stuff. Those are really cool. Once you learn what they do and how you can use them, it might be worth getting all of your material together that you want to convert, pay for 1 month subscription to the app so you don't get their logo branding on it, process through all of the content that you want, and then unsubscribe, because nobody wants to pay every month for stuff that you don't use more than once a year.
Wow. Okay. And I was watching something on deep faking, which is also very interesting. This is bloody great. Does anybody else have anything they want to kick around right now? I know I wanted to talk about sampling and samplers. Rose, go.
Hey, so on the topic of phone apps that Aussie Rob brought up, I would suggest Viva Video is a pretty good one actually for like video editing, like on your phone. Like, let's say you don't have a computer. Let's say you just got your phone, right? And you want to like just do some quickie, promotional. I've tried out a couple of different ones, and that was the one that I ended up enjoying the best. They do leave their watermark on it if you're using the free version, which is fine. Or you can do like what he said and make a bunch of videos, and then once you have as many videos as you want, then you pay for that month. And it's only like $4 anyway. You pay for it, and then you don't have to have the watermark on it. But it's great for doing like a quickie slideshow, like I did for this Dark Wonderland event, and I just took like different, I had a song, I took different pictures of all of the performers, and then I actually had a voiceover option. So I just plugged my little, external microphone, into my phone, and boom, and I had like a promotional video for a show that was free. I just did it myself. I did it on my phone. It didn't really take that long. It's a pretty good resource for that kind of stuff. And also on the topic of free DAWs that can also do audio and video editing, Reaper actually is an amazing free DAW that can also do video editing as well.
Awesome. 5 bags of awesome. I think Alex was hinting. Go, Alex.
I think Reaper is technically not free, but it has a very generous trial mode.
Yes, you're right. It's technically not free, but all the features are available.
Exactly.
Like almost all of the features are available. It's very, like you said, very generous. So.
And they don't lock you out or anything. You just say, yeah, I'm still figuring it out. But it's only, I think, $60, so it's the most affordable.
It's definitely affordable. It has a little bit of a learning curve, but it's an incredibly powerful program, and it's super stable also.
I think the audio engine is really great, but I find it a bit confusing, as you said. But also you can customize it to no end, so you can look at like whatever. It's from the guy who wrote what was it called, like an MP3 playing software. Winamp, right? Yeah. And he had so much money, he just did this as a pet project, so that's why it's so cheap and so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't forget that there's you shouldn't be limited to one app, right, or one tool. It's like just having one plugin or one keyboard. It's cool and you can master it, but you're limited to it. So my workflows usually involve multiple different products, and I'll jump from one to the other until I get what I want, because not everything has all the features that you want in one product. So if you daisy chain the use of 2 or 3 different apps or programs in your workflow, you'll probably find that whatever you can think about, you can probably make it in 2 or 3 apps pretty easily. You just got to work out the workflow of, I'll process this way in this app first, and then I'll make a copy, and then I'll process that copy in this other app, and then see how that goes. And then, you can kind of work it out. I guess Unreal is a little bit totally open, where you can modify every single parameter you can think of, which is enormous for your brain. Your brain explodes or implodes. I don't know what it does, but using a single program and being proficient at it, then jump to another program to do that as well. That's a good approach.
Awesome. Does anybody else want to throw in on this subject, or do we want to move on to something else, or do we want to call it a Sunday?
I thought you were going to talk about sampling.
I could definitely talk about sampling for days.
I did almost a whole day of sampling yesterday. It was really fun. Yeah.
You should put a link to your Patreon, because Rob's got a whole bunch of really excellent samples on his Patreon.
Well, I posted them on the ANGELSPIT Discord,
yes,
and that's why you didn't see it, Carl, because you're anti-Discord.
I suck. Do me a favor, post it, put it in the chat, and I'm gonna send it off everywhere.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a whole batch. I'm gonna do a couple 100 meg zip file, and we're gonna stick it on the MTV TV Patreon.
Good.
So it's gongs, dings, bashes, clashes. I've got fast jet sounds, automotive sounds, machine sounds.
And this is stuff you've taken.
Yeah, and you can use any of these engine sounds as modulators. So think about that, oscillators and modulators, because they have frequencies with harmonics. So don't listen to the standard sound, the standard FLAC or the wave file, and think, oh, okay. Think about what you can do with that sound. Stretch it, reduce it. I will do some lower bit resolution versions of them as well, just so people don't have to convert them. But yeah, clangs. My shed at the moment looks like a horror movie. I got all of these trampoline springs hanging all the way through the ceiling of the shed, and there's pieces of metal and sharp objects hanging from all of those springs. and I've been going through and bashing them with different size hammers to get samples done with my little Shure MV88 mic, which attaches to my iPhone. So there's a couple of samples on ANGELSPIT'S Discord under General.
You bloody rock. Thank you. Julius, go. And let me make a big noise when those samples are on MTV TV's Patreon, because that's
Bam.
As in now?
No, big sound. You said big sound.
Well, when they're up there.
Bam.
Great.
I know.
He's rehearsing. That's good.
Yeah, I know.
You took the word bam right out of my mouth. Julius, bam me.
I have a very brief and practical question. It's something completely else from what we just talked. Do you normalize your vocals? And if yes, why? If no, why?
Me personally, yes. I definitely normalize them. I actually take the WAV file itself and I will normalize it, compress it 3:1 at -8 dB with a 0 attack and a long, like 200-300 millisecond decay. And then I'll anti-noise them. And I'll do that to the base WAV file. Because I can then go through and adjust stuff if I want to add more compression, because you can't compress vocals enough, or anything else. Yeah, I always process the vocals quite a lot before they're actually in the DAW, raw audio in the DAW. That's just me, though.
What's the exact advantage you take from this?
The advantage is the signal to the noise, because I have to get rid of signal to noise. And as you hear, I have helicopters and cars and everything going always. And if it's not that, then it's an air conditioner. So I've got to process a lot of noise out of stuff. I'll also put a high pass filter at 50 cycles, because there's anything that's 50 cycles in my voice, even 80 cycles, I don't want it in there. It's going to be fucking with the compressors and everything else. I just like a really high, strong volume, because once it's, it's easier to have it in there at max volume and then bring it down. Bringing it down so the compressor isn't working as hard as or XYZ than it is to bring something up. So I'm not a -18 dB kind of guy. I'm 0 dB. Well, actually, 0.1 dB minus, because I never normalize to 0. And I've learned back on samplers that when I go to 16K on the Emaxes, it's got to be -3, because anything that's really hot, like 0 dB or -0.1 dB, when you go to 11K at 8-bit, it's going to distort it, and that's not always pretty. I'm going to shut up now, Alex, and tell me something amazing, Alex.
I don't, but I tried. If I have a microphone, I use the low-cut feature on my mixing console, so I don't have to deal with that in post. Because they often have, like, for microphone inputs, like a button you can press that cuts everything about below 50 or so. So
cool. Thank you. Eric, give me some of your love and knowledge, Eric.
Carl, I'll do my best. All right. I don't normalize my vocals. I don't live in a noisy place. I'm in the basement, and I have soundproofing around my vocal booth that I built into my bookcase. And I run my vocals through an old Alesis 3630 compressor from my father. It's a badass compressor. Then that goes into a preamp, and then that runs into my box going into my computer. So I have all hardware set up where I can adjust volume to where I need it to be. If I'm whispering, I can turn it up. If I'm screaming, I can turn it down. So everything runs through equipment. And then I have a metal screen. What am I blanking on what it's called? Whatever it's called.
Filter.
Thank you. Oh boy. Yeah, so I have a metal pop filter for my mic. That all runs, like I said, into my computer. And then the vocals are already pretty set where I need them to be. And then when I go into my DAW and I start cutting and editing and doing stuff with the vocals, like Carl said, I cut all. I think I do like 75 or 80. I have it preset for vocals, my EQ, and I just cut all that boom out and that mud because it messes with every other instrument that you're trying to do on the low end. So it sounds muddy and clogged. So I cut all that, and then I have an EQ for my voice specifically of how I want my voice to sound, with like peaks in like 10,000, 6,000 that I dip below other ones I don't remember. Like I said, I have it preset. But yeah, so I don't normalize anything. I do all that through all the hardware, and then I drop all that low end out, and then I cut and do what I need to and add effects and stuff. So I do not normalize.
Cool. Rob, give me your logical wisdom, Rob.
I do pretty much what Eric does, but I will always record dry and wet. So I will, not in my pants, but you know, my audio is usually through an SM58 or it's through a Antelope condenser mic, which will go through my Onyx Mackie preamp. Then I will use the send receive for compressor and EQ, or it'll go through the TC Helicon Mark III thingy. I can't remember the name of it. Which has got built-in compressors and effects and chorus and all that sort of stuff. And those will get recorded into my little multi-track, which has a USB on it. It's this little guy here. Oh, sorry, don't worry about it. I record into a Zoom R16, which allows me to record, you know, multiple channels at once into USB as my interface to the DAW. So then I've got my dry signal in my DAW, so I can add vocoder or whatever I want to do to that track later as a separate strip. And I've got my compressed and effects in my headset. So when I'm singing, I like the sound of how I sing and I get into the groove and it all happens magically. I guess my view of normalization is a little bit different to yours. When I hear normalization, I think about the levels of multiple tracks on an album being normalized. But I kind of get what you're saying. And some people like to double compress their vocals to kind of beef them up a bit. And that gives them more body, if you like. And that is a really good practice that a lot of people do, is double compress. And there's nothing wrong with getting there, you know, with the EQ in between those compressions and tweaking with the parameters. That's me.
Cool. Eric, more, Eric, more. Rob had to go there. Eric, you're muted.
I hit the wrong button. All right. Just go with what let me restart. What Rob was saying, double compression for vocals. I don't really compress any instruments unless I need to bring something up that's softer or something's too loud to make it balanced. I only compress vocals, and then if I'm mastering a track, I obviously use compression on the master track, or send them out to somebody else to do it because mastering's not fun. But double, so I have a hardware compressor that I run through, so it's already, my vocals are already compressed going into my DAW, and then on my vocals for each track I have another compressor on it. I don't remember exactly the name of it. It's a Waves compressor that I use. I'm a huge fan of Waves stuff, but I also use a I also use a limiter on vocals as well, and I don't always double compress vocals. I double compress them if I need to add a extra bump to it. Usually I don't. The limiter will bump them up to where I need it to be, and then that second compressor will add that extra power if I need it. But yeah, double compression on vocals is definitely good.
Bam. Okay, that's a whole bunch of interesting. It's also interesting that, you know, when you're putting stuff down, do you affect it or do you affect it in post? I am getting, look, vocals I always do dry. I never, and maybe I should start, you know, affecting the vocals as they go in. because fuck it, do something different. But I'm starting to increasingly add effects to synthesizers. Like the effects are actually built into the chain of stuff. Like it might go a reverb, then distortion. If you've never done it, it's the best thing in the world, especially if it's a gated reverb, then distortion. Eric?
Unmuted. So, Carl, the one thing you gotta watch out for if you're gonna run effects going into vocals, like if you're doing them wet, you're gonna get more feedback and you're gonna have more noise in your vocals coming in and more air coming in. So then if you have to normalize now, you might have to normalize even more to get that extra air out of them.
Okay, I've never thought about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that when I do mixing for other vocalists, I always ask them to do a dry recording because they always amplify stuff that you don't want by running it through an effects of some sort. And once it's done, once it's baked in, you can't get rid of it.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah, it's hard to get out. I do actually, I have a little, like I record with a little, my reverb is on, but I don't use a lot of reverb. So that's the only thing I use going into it is reverb, and then I do everything else after. But yeah, any kind of distortion or stuff. I mean, you can do it, but it's gonna be noisy. And like Rob said, you can't get that out then.
Yeah, it's trying to like do a DS after you've added reverb and chorus to vocals. It's like, forget it. You'll totally screw it.
Guys, you guys just talk. I've got to do something super fast. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Dum, 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 dum,
Talk,
dum,
talk.
dum,
Talk,
dum.
talk.
So the TC Helicon effects thing that I got is the Voice Live 3 Extreme, and it kicks ass. Watch some YouTube videos on Voice Live 3 Extreme. It's quite good. It does it will give you chorus, it'll do off pitch, like about 4 or 5 different versions of you, slightly off pitch. You can add compression in line with that as well. It's a looper, so if you want to do stuff on guitar or voice, it's a looper. It's a pedal board, and also it does a lot of vocoding, including some really cool video effects. Like if you want to sound like Barry White, you know, it's got a Barry White mode, so it changes the pitch, everything in real time. It's actually quite cool. But that's my go-to effects pedal for vocals, outside of the box. Inside of the box, you know, it's the same as what you guys use, whatever plugins sound good, you know.
That's funny because I have the TC Helicon Voice Live Play, which is a couple of versions before the one that you have. But
yeah, it's good.
It's dope. I like it a lot. It's it's really nice. It's really sturdy. I've had it for like many years, and it has like nothing wrong with it. You know, like no dents, no scratches. Like it's tough as hell. It's a little tank of a pedal, and I just like having something. I think it's important to have like a foot pedal for live situations, especially because I cannot stand to see the vocalist like bending down to like twiddle knobs and stuff like that. I hate it. So everything that I have is foot operated. Oh, you guys might be interested in this. Here's something nifty and weird and different. This guy. So this is the it's called the Backtrack Pro. This is what I play all of my tracks, my backing drum tracks live, because even though we are like horror punk metal hybrid whatever, we actually don't have a live drummer. So because I came from goth and industrial, and it's totally fine, but it's really funny because I have this conversation at every single show. Everybody's like, where's your drummer? And then they're like, you know, you guys are so good live that I don't even care that you don't have a drummer. You know what I mean? But it's like, but they're shocked. They're like, where's the drummer? You know, but you sound really good, so I guess it's fine, you know. But this little guy was not that expensive. It was like 100 and change. I did a show with a laptop one time, and I could not stand it. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't take it. It hurt me to my soul. I know other people have no problem with it, and that's totally cool. But for me, I don't like the latency issues that you can get from running with a laptop. And, you know, especially because I didn't have the best, strongest laptop either. So that made it even worse. So yeah, this thing saved my life. I went hunting and searching for something that could operate my drum track where I wouldn't have to fiddle, because again, this is a foot pedal. So all I have to do is just step on it. You know, the only time that that you have to twiddle the knob is when you're switching to the next track.
What signal do you put into that?
This takes actually a little smart card on the side of the, so right here on the side.
So that's literally your backing track.
Yeah, it's literally a little
cool.
tiny smart card, and that loads all of your backing drum tracks or whatever onto here. This is the level, so you can, you know, obviously mine's just maxed the hell out. This is all of your tracks, and then within those tracks, these are the banks in the mode section, and you can also use it to just to practice. It comes loaded with a couple of like practice drum tracks and stuff, which is nifty. And I highly recommend it if you want something that's a foot operated thing that you can easily bust your tracks out on live, and you don't, you know, you just set it and forget it. You literally just like stomp it and you're done. Stomp. You just hold it and then it starts the next track. You know, it's very easy. It's like caveman.
I think that's if you were to combine that with your play TC Helicon, that's pretty much all the extreme version is.
Yeah,
because it's got a backtrack player, and the only interesting part is it includes automation. So you can, if you've got a verse, chorus, bridge, instrumental, you know, whatever, you can set the effects that you want for the vocals and the guitar per section of the song, and it will automatically switch when you go into that next bar, which is quite cool.
The voice play does that as well.
Oh, it does do that. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's a really neat feature.
Yeah, you can save it for like future shows or whatever. So if you have a song where you have like distortion on like the chorus, and then the rest of it is you just want like a nice pretty reverb and delay, and that's it. You know what I mean? You can totally do that. Or like if you have the verse with like the reverb and the delay, and then the distortion for the choruses, and then let's say for the bridge you want a totally different vibe, and you can totally do that too, which is really cool.
Awesome.
Just don't buy the bottom end version of TC Helicon.
Yeah.
Because they're not earthed properly, and they generate 60 hertz hum, and they're just impossible to filter out. I've had people try to fix them and they end up sending them back and getting something else.
Which version?
The bottom end TC Helicon pedals. They don't have a ground pin on the power supply, which is the first indication that you might have some problems. And they didn't earth and filter them throughout. And so whenever you plug them in, they're just going to hum. They're just going to create noise. And, you know, people like Carl loves noise and hum. But if you don't want the noise and hum, you can't get rid of it. The one that Rose got is definitely the best quality one to buy at the mid-range.
Cool.
Yeah. I almost got the one that you have, Rob, but I ended up not getting it because at the time when it first came out, it had like an issue, which I'm sure is probably sorted out by now, but it was like an issue that a lot of people had. And it was just like, I was like, okay, I can't, you know, it's like I wanted something that was more dependable. So that's why I ended up getting the live play, but I almost got the same one that you got, but it was like right when it first came out, and it just came with like a manufacturer problem when it first was released.
They got a software patch to fix that. And you know, the Extreme 3 is an expensive piece of gear. So a lot of people would prefer to buy a hardcore synthesizer than an Extreme 3. But if you find one cheap, buy it. I get a lot of my cheap stuff through Facebook Marketplace. Some people don't know what they're selling, and some people just want to offload. And I bought mine from a guy in Tampa who was leaving the country selling all his music gear. And instead of paying $1,000 for it, I paid like $400.
Nice. It's also a good place to buy things like rack cases and stuff like that. Rack cases are, you know, anything that's like a very big, bulky thing, you know what I mean? That it would cost a lot to mail it, you know? So you wouldn't get a very good deal on that if you're buying it online. But if you just need like a rack case or something, always buy it through like Facebook Marketplace or something like that, because you're just gonna get like the same exact thing, but for way, way cheaper.
Just don't pay through Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah,
Use PayPal.
Mm-hmm.
There are tons of rip-offs on.
Yeah, PayPal
on
will protect you because it'll be like, did you get your thing, and did this count as a transaction and not? Oh, and if you do pay through PayPal, make sure not to mark it as a gift, because once you mark something as a gift, you're giving up all of your rights as a customer when it comes to PayPal stuff.
Awesome.
So we had about 3 segues while you were gone. I don't know what we're up to now.
Okay. So do we want to talk about samples and stuff, or do we want to call it today, guys? What's going on?
Let's do samples. Let's talk sampling.
Okay. Well, it's funny. I just samplers are really interesting because like they can be very overwhelming. That, you know, when people, there's all this stuff you can grab and and then before you know it, you've got gigs and gigs of samples. And what I'm trying to do, I'm really inspired by what Depeche Mode were doing in music for the masses and all that sort of stuff, where they would have the entire song laid out along the keyboard, so they could actually play that. They could actually play the song on the keyboard, play it a la rock and roll. And I did something like that with my old band Jekyll Switch, and it's something I'm doing now with the new ANGELSPIT'S stuff. And it's really interesting how, because you've only got so much space, and you've only got, once again, it's limitations, you've only got so much space, you've only got so much memory, you start getting rid of a whole bunch of stuff. And it's just this profoundly different way of writing. And I'm also figuring out, the issues with dropping stuff down 20, 30 dB so I can drive them into distortion pedals and stuff, because coming straight out of a sampler into a distortion pedal is just crunch awful, because distortion pedals are looking for a lower volume. Super low input, super low output. So yeah, it's a lot of learning, and it's a lot of it's interesting how distortion brings certain beauty out of sounds. Like there might be something gurgling in the background of a sound, you don't hear it until you distort it and it comes up, and you might end up cutting out that front clang, but it's that end part where a car drives past or something, and it's just this beautiful, strange thing. So I guess I don't really have a lot to talk about, like, as far as learning. I'm just experimenting, and yeah, I just throwing myself into this thing, and I'm finding it interesting. It's interesting that the whole way that I write music is now, I have to change it for this experiment. Like, I would normally sit down, write a song, then take it to the modular and everything else and expand it. So I start with a strong song. But this time what I'm trying to do is create stuff based on sound and rhythm, and the rhythms within samples, and all of that sort of thing. And it's really, frankly, I feel like I'm a 15-year-old kid again, and I'm playing with the drum machine for the first time. Like, it's a really fun place to be right now. Alex, do you want to add anything, or?
If your sampler has MIDI input, one thing I think is really cool is to just, if you sequence your sounds, to going back to the beginning, to automate the pitch bend, and maybe have a virtual LFO play it. It can make samples feel completely new, and I use that on the Rumpler I have.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, the Emax is a very rudimentary sampler and a very rudimentary synthesizer. but that's its strength. It does these things precisely well. Like, if you want to make it sound like a crappy skinny puppy, everything it does when in the mode I'm doing sounds like skinny puppy warlock. Everything. And to me, because I've never let myself go there, now I'm going there, and it's like, oh my god, this is just fucking awesome. But no, yeah, man, totally. And there's a whole bunch of really cool controller things you can do with it, you know, in its own very rudimentary 1986 fashion. But there's all this stuff you can do that I want to get into more. Grim, hit me.
Hey, so I was going to say in that, with experimenting or trying to capture like wild sound, you don't know like how quiet or non-quiet something is until, like, I'll speak from experience, like you're a sound guy on a film project. Holy shit. Because when you get your headphones on and you cue up like a Zoom mic, for instance, you thought everything was quiet until you hear that plane that's X miles out, or there's a rumble in the train tracks. But I would say to use that to an advantage, I mean, if you got a good microphone, whatever you're using with a good windscreen, you could probably capture a lot of really badass wild sound from the metro or, you know, train stations or, and that could be an interlude to a song. That could be, part of the sub layer of it. That could be, I mean, I might be speaking to the choir, but I'm just trying to keep people reminded of, like, you can get some of that really cool signature sound that makes it unique. Or that could be the sound that bridges songs, you know, just kind of thinking outside the box. But constructively, you don't know how much wild sound there is until you get those headphones on and you start hearing things a different way instead of just hearing noise as one big thing, you know, one big chunk. You could start isolating.
Absolutely. And it's actually a really fun thing to do that if you are in an environment to record the sounds, because environments have pitches. Like if there is a buildings and that sort of thing, there's a wind tunnel being set up, and I'll record that stuff. I'll take maybe everything under 200 cycles out of it, so it's a pretty harsh high pass filter. I will heavily compress it. I'll take a sample that's like 4 seconds long or so, then I'll loop it in the Emax, and the Emax has got this really cool thing where it does a fade from one end of the loop to the other, so it kind of sucks the sound back into itself, and then drop it an octave or two. And the thing I love doing as well on the Emax is there's all this fun stuff you can do with like panning, like, you know, set up an LFO to pan it from hard left to hard right. So what I'll do is I'll take the left side, put it into a big reverb, and I'll take the right side and put it into a big delay. And it's a slow pan, so while it's over there, it's reverbing. Then it's in the middle, so it's reverb and delay. Now it's coming over here, and it's just delay. And you set that up through the whole song because, you know, something I took away with me from the whole Beatles in India thing was the drone. The drone was through everything. And if you're sampling, because one of the things I'm doing with this one is I'm trying to base everything on one thing, like an old spring. That spring has a pitch, it has harmonics, therefore it has drone. And I'm still figuring a lot of this shit out, but it's a really nice thing to experiment when you haven't got a fucking clue what you're doing. And you just start distorting shit. It's awesome. Drake, tell me your wisdom, my friend.
This is really great because sampling something like my own sampling, I work a lot with samples. A lot of them come from my friend in Ontario. He'll just send me stuff randomly. He's all about creating sounds that are hard to replicate, like really original stuff. But I used to carry around a voice recorder, and, you know, just something, you know, was there that I wanted to capture. It was at my fingertips. But now I got a voice app on my phone that is there, and like I said, you guys are inspiring me. I want to start using it more. In the Octatrack, what I like to do is slice up the samples. And I mean, I can take a given sample and, you know, work with it one day and have it sound one way, and approach it on another day and it just morph it into something completely different. You wouldn't even know it was the same sample. But by slicing it up and then looping over an arrangement, just by changing those start points, I can really like hone into different transients. And, you know, sometimes you just lock into something and it can be, you know, just looping over this tiny, tiny section of the sample and produce something just like brilliant that works in the track. So I like to do that a lot, just like sweeping through the sample and finding those sweet spots.
That's awesome. Rob, I'm going to jump in after you, but please go.
Yeah, remember the history of sampling was, you know, little tools that kind of look like this one. It's the little Roland with 8 buttons on it, and it's got your inputs, and it was like 4-bit, 8-bit, 12-bit, that sort of thing. I use samples in 4 different ways. I'll take an audio sample, a short burst audio sample, and I'll do what Drake says, and I'll loop it. So I use this one to just grab random stuff off cassette tapes, old cassette tapes, and I will use the loop and shift the start and stop points like the Octatrack does magically, but I'll do it manually to discover interesting sounds that might have inclusions in them. I'm not trying to make a clean cut audio file to put in a sequence. I'm creating sounds from samples and using the tools to shift and shove that signal around a little bit to find where the rejoin of the loop occurs. It can create a very unique sound. So I use the short sample audio. I'll also use a long sample audio, like I've just been setting up the Akai S5000, which does, you know, 32 channels of long time audio recording, and I'll pull out of my synth improv, I'll pull out tracks into that then I can snip up into either tones or into background tracks to play against. The good thing, if you're creating little sounds like these guys, the new version of this is really the Akai MPC Live or whatever it is, the MPC1, and that's where a lot of rap music came from, was people tapping these guys instead of using the keyboard. So the keyboard mapping is great, but the good thing about something like the Octatrack or the MPC Live is that you can clearly colorize and assign those sounds so you know where to tap them to generate your own beat. The other thing you can do is when you take a short audio sample is once you've found that interesting sound, then you loop that right out as a tone for your synth, and you can modulate that through your synth. The other type that I do is not audio signal, but modulation signal. So you're recording sounds to use as modulation signals that you won't actually hear. It will be affecting your audio sample, if that makes sense. So when you sample a drone sound, really interesting drone sound with some inclusions in it, that might be that nice random noise generator pattern that you want to apply or modulate your audio track with, so it sounds really freaky, sketchy, jittery. So don't forget that your sampling can be for listening audio as well as modulation of audio. You can create tones with your synth, or you can just use them as beats, or you can use them as an extended backing track where you dial up and down the pitch to try to get the mood that you want. That's what I use sampling for.
Thanks. Just give me a sec, Drake. That's brilliant. Like the whole something I love doing is, because I've got really good noise filtration software where you can go through and pull out air conditioning and traffic and stuff. But if you abuse that, you get the coolest stuff, and you're left with all of these digital light artifacts, and it sounds like if you leave a mic on in your house at night, you will find speech in there. And, you know, it might not be ghost talking. It could be the neighbor's TV, or it could be, you know, anything at all. But then when you start using that stuff in your music, man, and you start using it as this big, beautiful loop, this is kind of getting back to the Beatles again. You've got this wonderful stuff. Just take the time with it and have fun. And that was another thing I've noticed about, as I may have mentioned, like everything Depeche Mode ever did is now on Emax, and it's free for everyone. And when you listen to, the way they looped stuff incorrectly, but it rocked. Tongue, 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 like that. There's your loop. The loop's supposed to be tongue. So the instrument actually plays out on that note. But they didn't. They would loop the whole 1 second thing. So it would loop. Tongue, 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 tongue. And they put a long delay on it. So they'd be playing these melodies with all of these parts that were looping at different times. And it just comes back down to freeing your mind. That this machine doesn't fucking care about genre or anything. It's just a whole bunch of numbers that it wants to turn into music and sound. So, if these machines have a spirit in them, to try and utilize that spirit and to try and utilize, okay, I'm getting metaphysical now, all of those people who have gone before you and use these machines. Be inspired by what they did, and it's as if they've taken a cool idea and they've hung it on the great Emax in the sky, or on the great Mini Moog in the sky, or on the great Octatrack in the sky. Try and channel that. Yeah, okay, that's a philosophy I have for another time. Drake, save me. And then we got to wind this up soon, but go.
I don't know if I'm going to save you. I'm very much resonating on the same frequency as you right now. I mean, when occasionally I'll approach something like that with a preconceived notion of where I want to go, but more often than not, I find I get better results when I don't have my brain getting in the way, and to just kind of, let the machine, or the ghost in the machine, kind of, come through and let the magic happen. Like experimentation can be a really beautiful thing. And you reminded me, I have a ghost hunting app on my phone that will actually allow you to record audio samples. And I've got a bunch of them here I forgot about that I need to download into my machine and fart around with. But yeah, there was something bigger I wanted to say. Oh yeah, reversing samples, play them backwards. Had some really, really great results. Just messing with them that way. Reverse it and see what happens.
Awesome. Rob.
Oh, I just got one little naughty thing to let you guys know about, and that is ripping different audio effects from DVD sources. So if you think about sound that you hear in typical stereo, there will be normally multiple sounds in just 2 channels. So it's really difficult to kind of separate out a sound. And if there's a really cool sound that you want to sample as a modulation signal source, for example, then what I use is this HDMI to analog box. What it does is it takes every channel of Dolby surround sound and puts them out as a single RCA channel, and that allows you to isolate interesting sounds in the track that you might want to tease out and use. So for example, you're playing The Matrix and you like the sound of a bullet whizzing from rear left to front right. You can actually pull those sounds out individually with a little cheap box like this. I think it was $10 on eBay or something. And then you can use that sound to use as a modulator. So you don't have to use the actual audio. You might get yourself into DCMA problems if you do that, but you can use those sources and modify those sources how you see fit. Just a little cheat mode that I use.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Does anything else? I've just got a little eye on the time. We usually wrap it up right about 9. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up, or do we want to Brady Bunch out of here? Okay, let's Brady Bunch on out of here. For those on Twitch, we're going to shoot on over to MTV TV because that's where it's at. But everybody else here, we're just going to hang out and have a chat. Bye.